Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well. The following are first-hand accounts from emergency telecommunicators, provided by Ecom 911. Please keep in mind that these stories may be disturbing to some readers. Viewer discretion advised. There were a lot of incoming 911 calls when there was a jumper on a bridge. I took one of the calls and actually got the caller who was on the bad side of the railing, wanting to jump. I had to talk them down and get them to start walking off the bridge, towards safety. This individual was crying and sounded like they were in deep pain. They asked me to give them a reason on why they shouldn't jump today, just one reason. I didn't know what to say because I did not want to trigger them, such as by bringing up family, so I ended up saying, please don't jump today for me. Let's walk off this bridge together. They ended up walking off the bridge while talking to me, and the police were there shortly after. I feel like I helped them in that one moment, knowing someone cared about them. It was definitely a high-stress call, as we don't usually end up talking to the actual person who wants to jump off the bridge. I received an emergency call from a 911 prefix cell phone. A phone without a SIM card, so we wouldn't be able to call back. There was nothing said or heard. After about a minute, I was going to disconnect and chalk it up as an accidental call, until I thought I heard a voice faintly say, "Help." I attempted to gain voice contact again, with no luck. While keeping the line open, I listened back to the call on our playback software and became somewhat confident that I had heard a voice. I began a file, and police were dispatched to the area. The cell phone mapped over one of two houses. Police went to the first house and attempted to speak with the occupants and were unsuccessful, so they moved to the second. Upon doing the door knock, a couple answered. Police inquired how many occupants were inside and if the well-being of them was known. The couple told the officers that their adult child was upstairs sleeping. Officers went upstairs to check and found that the individual was overdosing in the bathroom on mix of drugs and alcohol. Immediately, advanced life support was dispatched and quickly got to the scene to attend to the patient. If I had disconnected even a second earlier, they never would have made it to the hospital. The following event is provided from Redditor U Vang Chung. I was a 911 dispatcher and a volunteer firefighter in the town that I dispatched for. To set the story up, the way 911 works in the state I lived in at the time was your call will first go to a 911 call center, where an operator pulled up all the electronic information, GPS location if cell phone, and then determines the location, usually by asking the caller, before forwarding the call to the proper fire department dispatcher, me, in the area of the call, who will get the location again and the emergency information and dispatch the fire department and or the ambulance. The operator will stay on the line while the caller talks to the dispatcher, but they usually don't say anything and let us talk to the caller. If we need additional location info, they sometimes chime in with additional info. So, I'll first say that I wasn't dispatching the night of this particular call. I was actually one of the first on scene with the fire engine for the call because I was with the volunteer FD that night. 2 cars full of girls that had just come from a soccer team pasta dinner decided to go ghost hunting in our town late one night because we had an old abandoned mental hospital in our area. We also have very windy, unlit back roads. The girls were going way too fast, and one of the cars didn't negotiate a sharp corner very well. The vehicle rolled, and 2 girls were ejected from the vehicle before the car rolled on top of them. Those 2 girls did not make it. The eerie part about the call was the next dispatch shift I worked. I talked to the dispatcher who was on that night, and we reviewed the tapes of the call. Even though I was on scene for that call, listening to the recording of the call was terrifying. I heard our dispatcher answer the call, but all that could be heard on the other end was screaming. Screams of horror from teenage girls as they try to help their friends. Sheer terror. I've never heard screaming like that before. That's when the 911 operator spoke up over the screams to the dispatcher. "Hey, I have no idea what is going on. I wasn't able to get any info from anybody. The call comes up on GPS in the area of 123 Street redacted. That's all I have." Luckily, the dispatcher was smart and realized that there was a true emergency, so he not only dispatched my department, but the next closest department as well for extra personnel. Listening to that playback was one of the most unsettling things I've ever had to listen to. This next event was uploaded to Reddit by an undisclosed dispatcher. A lady calls in hysterics. I spend a solid 2 minutes on the phone, trying to get her to calm down enough that I can understand her. And the whole time I hear someone screaming in a language I can't recognize in the room with her. It sounds like some fanatic speaking in tongues. I finally get her calmed down enough to understand what she's saying. My husband shot himself in the head. You've got to help him. He's talking to me, but I don't understand what he's saying. Please, please, please. You've got to come help him. The husband and wife were arguing. The husband was drunk. He gets his 45 and shoots himself in the head. The incoherent yelling I was hearing was his broken brain trying to scream, cry, ask for help. He was still alive when they got to the hospital, but was taken off life support the next morning. This next story is from Redditor user Psychedelic Goat. A friend of mine who used to dispatch has the worst story I've ever heard. It was one of her first solo 911 calls, and the caller is requesting medical help with slurred speech. My friend was under the impression it was an elderly gentleman experiencing a stroke. When units arrived on scene, however, they discovered that the caller was a 17-year-old who had been shot in the face by his mother. He bled out and died while my friend was on the phone with him. This next story is from Redditor user Shumani. I worked as a police dispatcher and call taker for a while. There are many different types of disturbing calls, such as calls from mentally disturbed people, and calls that leave you shaking afterward. My most terrifying call was from a guy who was on the verge of committing suicide. I actually don't mind suicide calls because the calls are usually made by friends, family, or after the fact, so you can usually get information and send out the call. However, in this case, the actual guy called. He was extremely high or drunk, sobbing uncontrollably, heavy emphasis, and was using an old deactivated cell phone, so I could only find the general area of where he was calling from. He had a knife to his throat and was on the roof of a high-rise. I could not get through to him because he was out of his mind and refused to tell me where he was while crying the whole time. I was on the phone with him for 10 minutes trying to figure out where he was and using everything I had in my arsenal to get him to not go through with it. During all this time, I was only able to get his name. He then hung up, but 10 minutes later called back and I got him again. For the next 20 minutes, it was the same unresponsive threats to kill himself, but I pinged his cell and saw that he was near some apartment complexes, so I said fuck it, and sent cruisers to every apartment complex in the area and told them to find a crying guy with a knife. I was on the phone with this guy for about 20 more minutes while the cops searched the area and finally found him hiding under a staircase in an apartment complex with a knife. I found out later they shipped him to a hospital and that he was fucked up on something. This next story is from Redditor user Gangrapedchickens. I was a year into the job in a pretty large town with woods all around. I got a call from a young man who identified himself as being 21 years old. He said he went on a hike with his best friend. But this is where it got weird. I asked for his location, and it was about 50 miles from the nearest trailhead, but not in the direction the trails move. I asked him to tell me what the problem was and what services he needed when he burst into tears, saying one moment his friend was in front of him, and the next he was gone. I dispatched the sheriff and was told neither man was ever found. It still freaks me out. This next entry is from an undisclosed dispatcher from Reddit. I was a 911 dispatcher the day Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. We started getting lots of calls from New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast for some reason. I guess they started routing to us after all the centers to the west of us started going down. Anyway, I got a call from a woman who said she was trapped in her house on Gordon Street, between Florida and Law. I was confused at first because we have a Florida street in Mobile, and after double checking and not being able to find her address, I asked her what city she was calling from. She said, "I'm in New Orleans." I tried to route her to New Orleans Dispatch and to the fire department but could not get through. She started screaming and said the water was coming up into the attic where she was. I told her to find something heavy and break the attic vent out so she could get out onto her roof, but the vent was too small for her to crawl. She sat down and started crying. I told her I would stay on the line with her for as long as she wanted me to. I stayed on the line and listened as she cried, prayed, cussed, and prayed some more. A little while later, I could hear her struggling to keep her head and phone above water. Then the phone went dead. To this day, I don't know if she lived or died. I quit 3 months after Katrina. Thank you for watching and supporting this video. These 911 calls remind us of the strength and bravery shown in the most critical moments. A special thank you to all the dispatchers, police, fire, and EMS responders. Your dedication, composure, and courage save lives every day. We appreciate everything you do. Stay safe and take care. One more note. If you're struggling with mental health issues, PTSD, or depression, please know that you're not alone. Many people face similar challenges, and help is available. It's okay to ask for support, whether from friends, family, or professionals. Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.